When you're going for the style of Dracula made famous by Bela Lugosi, and you're going for a pure charmer, you get Frank Langella. Welcome to my channel, KC. That's me, Carrie Chuck, the Sledge Storyteller. And while I think the review I made last week for Count Dracula by BBC is the best direct adaptation of the Dracula novel, the 1979 Dracula movie is the best adaptation of the Dracula play, in my opinion. And it's being an adaptation of the play written in the 1920s by Hamilton Dean and John L. Balderston, and that they cast the title role with someone who first played it in the play.
I love New York, especially in the evening.
Are the two key parallels between this movie and the Bela Lugosi movie. There will be other parallels that I will be mentioning along the way. Anyway, the plot. The year is 1913, and the story starts with the ship carrying Dracula inside his coffin on its way to Whitby, England. There's a torrential storm violently rocking the ship, and the crew think it's whatever's in the coffin's fault, so they make the desperate effort to toss it overboard. But a slant on the base stops it from going right over the edge, which buys Dracula enough time to break his hand through and choke a crewman. And from there, ultimately, no one from the crew is found alive. The boat crashes on the beach by Whitby Port, wherefrom leaps Dracula as the wolf. Solicitor Jonathan Harker arrives at the scene to attend to Count Dracula's cargo, since he brokered the real estate deal for Carfax Abbey, to the chagrin of Renfield, who felt cheated out of running the deal. Yet he still takes on the duty of bringing Dracula's crates to his new dwelling. Watching all the excitement unfold is Mina Van Helsing. Yes, there's no going over this movie without clarification on the two main female characters. Mina Van Helsing is, yes, daughter to Dr. Van Helsing, not yet arrived for the story, and she ends up filling the Lucy Westenra role for the novel. Lucy Seward is Harker's fiancée. And also like Mina Seward in the Bela Lugosi movie, she's Dr. Seward's daughter. So Mina runs out after the ship's abrupt docking and follows the wolf into a cave, only to find him on the tail end of his morphing back to human status. She seems already starting to become entranced by him. Renfield is at Carfax Abbey pulling in all of Dracula's crates. Dracula has made his way back into his coffin for rejuvenation, and once all the cargo from the ship is in the castle, Dracula pounces on Renfield. Move on to Dracula's arrival to the dinner that Dr. Seward had invited him to. He's a perfect gentleman here, gushing with charm. Mina and Lucy are both enamored by that charm, and Mina behaves like it overwhelms her when she faints. Dr. Seward naturally wants to tend to her, voicing the intention of administering drugs, but Dracula...
No drugs. You must not pollute her blood.
It's easy to pick up from that Dracula cannot handle bitter-tasting blood. He demonstrates hypnosis as a cure for her lethargy, but makes her subject to his mind control in the process. Back to Carfax Abbey, Renfield recovers and suddenly has an appetite for whatever critter he can get his hands on, starting with cockroaches. Dracula confronts him face to face with the promise of a long life if he only do his bidding. That night, while Jonathan and Lucy have a romantic conversation interlude, Dracula breaks into Mina's room. He's got that look, and we know that he bites her off screen. Lucy had come back to their shared bed, not knowing what had transpired, and the next morning, Mina starts gasping for breath. Dr. Seward arrives to help, and all he can do is tell her to take deep breaths. But she can't, and abruptly passes away. So the movie wasted no time in transitioning that death. Professor Van Helsing arrives after hearing the horrifying news of his daughter's passing, and is extremely inquisitive, leading you to believe that he already has some suspicions that supernatural forces are at play. Dracula invites Dr. Seward, Lucy, and Jonathan to dinner, but only Lucy can make it. And while Dracula romantically warms her up for a future unique form of vampire's romance, suddenly a ghostly female figure breaks out of a window of Dr. Seward's sanatorium, where a grieving mother is suddenly screaming over the offing of her baby, describing the aggressor as...
And she had these long, dreadful teeth, like fangs
Van Helsing naturally pays a visit to his daughter's grave. Lucy is also there. It becomes apparent that he fears that she too is in the same danger and gifts her with a cross necklace. In foreboding and ominous fashion, Dracula arrives on horseback. Now it's revealed later in the movie that, like Count Orlok in a previous video I reviewed, direct sunlight is lethal to Dracula, but apparently here he benefits from there being a heavy overcast. He says that he too is there to pay his respects to Mina. He notices from a distance Lucy's new necklace. After she tells him that it was a gift from Van Helsing, he buffers with,
How kind.
Van Helsing has his own idea of who the mysterious and violent woman was at the sanatorium, and from that he and Seward dig up Mina's coffin, only to find it empty. Then Van Helsing goes underground, and sure enough, there is his daughter, a ghostly white vampire, warming up to him in false sincerity, and makes a go for his throat before Dr. Seward manages to intervene with a cross, and then she gets staked. One difference I am seeing in this Dracula movie is that the staking never goes through a vampire's heart, it always goes through the stomach. Don't ask me. But Mina is returned to her coffin, and Van Helsing takes the final measures to see that her curse is broken. The dangers become real as Dracula breaks into Lucy's room, and we know. Only we get a montage of goth horror mixed with 70s psychedelic in the whole process. Lucy is found to be pale in the next morning, and Van Helsing arranges a blood transfusion from Jonathan and fortifies her room with garlic. And now we go to what might be my most favorite scene in the whole movie. Van Helsing and Dracula meet. Van Helsing shows what he's using to treat Lucy.
You are a wise man, Professor. For one who has not lived even a single lifetime.
We see a rendition that replicates the sequence seen in Bela Lugosi's movie of a lifted hand, demanding Van Helsing to come to him. In this case, it was done better in 1931. But then another similarity comes into play at this point, where Van Helsing brandishes the cross, followed by a beautifully rendered split-screen effect of Dracula jumping through the window and becoming a wolf in the process. After another bedroom break-in, Lucy has fallen under Dracula's spell and has to be stopped from driving to Carfax Abbey to warn him. Jonathan and Van Helsing arrive at Carfax Abbey, intent on killing Dracula with a wooden stake, but Dracula is not where they targeted him. Jonathan tries to brandish the cross, but his lack of faith makes it ineffective. Dracula morphs into a bat and attacks Jonathan, but Van Helsing manages to uncover a window that lets the sunlight in, forcing Dracula to fly away. Lucy's now in the sanatorium, not yet a full-fledged vampire, for Dracula needs her to survive the daylight and the big transit to Transylvania. She too fakes her sincerity to Jonathan when he visits her before making a go for his neck. She is repelled by the cross, but Dracula finds his way into Renfield's room and condemns him for his disloyalty. You get the idea. Dracula then picks up Lucy and brings her to Carfax Abbey to prepare for a ship ride to Transylvania, where she would be his bride for centuries to come. In a shared coffin, they ride in a covered wagon en route to Whitby Port. Jonathan, Seward, and Van Helsing give chase in Jonathan's car, but the road is too narrow to pull ahead of the wagon. Ultimately, the car is damaged and unable to function, so they are forced to travel the remaining 10 miles on foot. The ship is far out to sea by the time they arrive, but they manage to have a boat take them out there, where they jump on and make their way to the cargo hold, where they do find Dracula and Lucy in the coffin. But of course, Dracula puts up a fight. Van Helsing is the one who gets staked. Jonathan tries to swing the sharp hoisting hook at Dracula, but he catches it and throws it behind him. In desperation, Jonathan shoots his gun but causes no apparent damage. But Van Helsing has enough remaining heartbeats to seize the hook and impale Dracula's back with it. Then Jonathan pulls the lever that launches Dracula up the mast in direct exposure to the sun, which converts him into well done status. Van Helsing has passed away, Lucy returns to normal, and mysteriously Dracula flies off in the distance, leaving it up in the air if he still lives or has taken on a new form. I can remember I first saw this when it aired on either TBS or TNT, and I immediately embraced it. I've always felt that Frank Langella brought the perfect spectrum of charm and ferocity to the adapted stage play version of Dracula, and I find it fascinating to see how a medical condition became a strength for him. Langella's nystagmus, as it's called, which causes involuntary rapid eye movements, gave that added feeling of eeriness. I've seen Laurence Olivier get a lot of flack over his performance as Van Helsing for seeming to be feeble against Dracula, and it's well known that his health had started to languish. Enough that Langella once said that he was amazed that Olivier managed to live another decade from then. I thought it was good enough for the most part. It wasn't that physical of a role, and he needed to do little more than brandish whatever repellent item he had on hand against Dracula, and he expressed just the right emotions needed for every scene he was in. Donald Pleasance did his shtick of always having something in his hands, doing something, while being methodical. He was convincing as the initial skeptic when told of vampires before bringing what he could to the fight. As Jonathan Harker, Trevor Eve reacted to everything with all the right emotions, from his businessman aspects to his romance with Lucy and his drive to do his part in bringing Dracula down. Kate Nelligan as Lucy took on the challenge of being level-headed to being consumed by Dracula's power over her, and she pulled it off in spades. Tony Haygarth as Renfield was convincingly maniacal. Jan Francis' role was short-played, but she did great as being overly curious, playing Mina, then naive, then the dying victim, and ultimately a lost soul vampire. John Williams, you always expect the best from him. He was riding the wave of Star Wars and Superman when he took on scoring Dracula. As you'd expect a Dracula theme to be, he made a largely bombastic score totally work for Dracula. Director John Badham, he had vision and all the right angles and pacing. It's well known that he wanted to make the film in black and white, but Universal would not allow it, and thus it was filmed in color. But before George Lucas made that polarizing decision to release his special edition Star Wars trilogy, John Badham in 1991 rendered Dracula in a desaturated color, almost sepia tone. My preferred version, where it feels more timeless and less like a 70s movie depicting a 1913 world. Therefore, I declare that it belongs in the pantheon of great Dracula movies. That's my take on Dracula 1979. Agree, disagree, something I left out? Please let me know in the comment section. The link to order my Sledge miniseries is in the description below. It's available in both paper and digital formats. Please give it a look. I'll keep saying it. Let's all look for civility out there amid any news about social and political strife. Let's not hate, and let's look upon everybody we meet as a potential friend. Everyone be safe, and God bless.